Good morning. Delighted to be here this morning. I'm on my join the IRS and see the USA in terms of the 25 largest IRS offices around the country. This is my 11th visit. I have town halls at each of these places with employees. I have lunch with a handful of employees selected by lot and at random, and then special presentations about issues that are going on in the area. And I'm delighted to do it. I do it because my experience in the private and the public sector has been people who know most about what's going on in an organization are the people doing the work, particularly the frontline employees and their managers. So I pick up a lot of very important and good issues in these areas. As a general matter, at each place I go, I continue to be impressed with the professionalism, skills, and dedication to the mission of the agencies by the employees. And Fresno is an important part of our operations. We have 7,000 people here running the gamut of all of our operations. And it's been a very high-performing area, so it's been fun to talk to managers and employees here today and learn more about what they're doing. We're in the middle of filing season. In some ways the most important activity we have, because we're going to expect to process approximately 150 million tax returns, which is a stunning number when you think about it. And over 80% of those will be filed electronically. Thus far, we have almost 50 million returns have been received, and over 90% of those have been filed electronically, which is consistent with prior years. So we expect that when the dust settles, again, over 80% will be filed electronically. It's an important time for taxpayers, an important time for us. We spend a lot of time with taxpayers trying to help them figure out how much do they owe and how to pay. So we have information on a much more usable website than it used to be, which we encourage people to look at to get answers to their questions. We have over 100 YouTube videos on our YouTube channel with instructions about how to fill out your forms and other questions you might have. We have had for a couple of years now the Where's My Refund app on our website. Last year we had 250 million hits. I'm sure that's more than one hit per person. A lot of people check fairly regularly to see where their refund is. But it's cut down on the amount of calls we've had. People can do that. This year, for the first time, you can authenticate yourself and actually get transcripts of prior filings rather than having to call or go to an assistance center. Also, we have a program that we've encouraged people to look at, which is called Free File. And so, if you earned under $58,000 last year, which covers about 100 million of the people filing returns, you can go on our website, select among the 14 software providers that we have an agreement with, and actually for free fill out your return as if you had bought one of those software packages. So it's, again, part of our effort to try to make tax filing season as simple as we can. We reach out regularly. We just filed earlier this week information to people. It's the first in our information flows about the Affordable Care Act. Most important information there is for anybody who's applied for and getting premium tax credits. They need to make sure if anything changes in their circumstances, they make more or less money, they need to adjust through the exchanges that tax credit so that next year they don't end up owing more funds as a result of having improved their circumstances as they go. One of the things we're advising people is that even with all of the new effectiveness of our website, and even in the face of IRS employees doing more than anybody probably has a reason to expect, trying to do their best to respond to taxpayers. As a result of our funding constraints, our lines are going to be very busy, wait times are going to be high. We're also concerned that wait times at our taxpayer assistance centers are going to be high. They're going to be higher than we'd like. They won't meet our standards for the services taxpayers deserve, but it's not because the employees aren't trying hard or aren't dedicated. It's because, in fact, we are significantly underfunded. We have $1 billion, about $900 million less in funding than we had 4 years ago, and about 10,000 fewer employees who are responding to the increased demands placed on the system, including implementation of the Affordable Care Act and the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act. But notwithstanding those constraints, filing season is going well. I continue to be thoroughly impressed with the energy and enthusiasm that our employees have, even in light of the difficulties federal employees have faced over the last several years with no pay raises for 4 years, the government shutdowns, furloughs, and then a lot of the adverse publicity around the IRS over the last 8 to 10 months. So April 15th is the date most taxpayers are looking toward to get their returns filed. Again, we stand ready to provide as much information as we can to make that as simple and straightforward a process as possible. Ready for questions?
I have a question. You mentioned the increasing automation of the website, the numbers of people who are filing electronically. As those numbers increase, does that diminish the need for a high number of employees at centers like this that process returns?
No, the bulk, again, already about 83% of our returns are filed electronically, and as I was just talking with the employees, because we deal with virtually all Americans, certainly 150 million taxpayers, while we encourage people to file electronically, there will always be a segment of the population that's either uncomfortable with or never got used to using websites, electronic filing, and are going to just be much more comfortable with paper. So we don't expect that in the near-term future we're going to run out of paper returns. We again would encourage people to file electronically to the extent they can. But I suspect we'll always have 5 or 10% of people who are going to just be more comfortable or only able to file with paper returns. So I don't think that process will go away in the near-term future.
Last week you all issued your dirty dozen scams, and I imagine electronically filing has made it easier for people to avoid some of these scams, but also made it easier for some of these crooks to take out the scams on taxpayers.
Right. We did file, I'm glad you mentioned that, our dirty dozen we do every year, trying to again advise taxpayers to be careful. Obviously you should never share personal information, social security numbers and others to anybody over the phone or somebody you don't know at the door. A couple of the major scams going on this year are people calling saying they're from the IRS, either asking for information or requiring payments be made under threat or coercion. If anybody gets those calls, they should ask for the name and number of the person calling and hang up, and then check with us to make sure that that's a legitimate call. There are phishing expeditions online with email, where what looks like a creative IRS site is not one, and again, you're asked for information, social security numbers and others, and again, don't respond to those. Check with us before you do it. But you're right, to the extent that you can file electronically, we've had an explosion over the last 3 years in refund fraud, where people beg, borrow, or steal a social security number, file a false return that shows they're owed a refund, and then get it. We've done a lot of work in that regard. We think we're making significant progress, although it still is a problem. We're most concerned about situations where taxpayers had their identity stolen, so that when they file their return, they're told it's not acceptable because their social security numbers already filed a return. We then have to figure out who the real taxpayer is. We have to work with those taxpayers to make sure they get the appropriate return. We're making progress. When this explosion first hit in 2010 and 2011, it took us up to a year to resolve that for the taxpayer. We're now down to new cases being resolved in 120 to 130 days, and we hope to get it down beyond that. But we're also working very hard to see if we can't eliminate that to the extent we can. We've had 1,400 investigations, 1,000 indictments, wide range, over 800, I think, convictions of people engaged in this. So what may have looked 2 or 3 years ago like a free good to criminals, I think we're now sending a strong message that if you get caught and we're chasing you hard, you're going to get convicted, and the sentences are not just a month or two. People are going away for 10, 20 years. And we think that one of the reasons we're getting a handle on this is some of the biggest purveyors of the fraud are actually now in jail.
Sir, you mentioned I believe it was 1,400 investigations, 1,000 indictments, and I didn't catch the number of convictions. But over what time frame are those numbers? Those
numbers are last year. In other words, our investigations have gone up from probably 200 2 years ago to 1,400. And the recommendations for indictments have gone up from probably 165 to 1,000. So that in a couple of years, we've made a quantum leap forward in the investigation and prosecution of those engaged in this activity. And they're not doing it one at a time. The criminals involved in this sometimes will be filing hundreds of fraudulent returns. They've gotten those social security numbers in a lot of different ways. And so we think, again, as we put some of them behind bars, there are going to be fewer of them out there engaged in it. But we're working hard on sophisticated fraud detectors. We're working with banks, with the Bureau of Prisons. Some of the fraudsters were in prison, unable to deal with it. We have task forces going on with state and local law enforcement. So we're moving on all fronts to deal with what is a significant problem.
As a consumer or taxpayer, is the best way to avoid this just to file your taxes as quickly as possible, or what would you tell them to do?
I would tell a taxpayer, file, as soon as you can, although if there's a fraudster out there, they probably already have tried to file. The most important thing for taxpayers is to protect their information. Don't reveal your Social Security number to anybody over the phone. If somebody bangs on your door and wants information from you, just get their name and number and then check with whatever organization they say they're with. Our experience is when you do that, if it's a fraudster, they don't call back, they disappear and they never bother you again. So we're spending a lot of time, for the last year or two, trying to sensitize people, again, on the dirty dozen scams to make sure that they don't assist those trying to file false returns by providing them the information.
To what extent does the reputation of the IRS and the fear of audits and things like that lend itself to play into the hands of some of these scammers who you mentioned, use fear of intimidation, coercion to try to employ frauds?
Right. Well, one of the things we're trying to get people to understand, and I had a good meeting with revenue agents and officers in Philadelphia on my tour, is that if you have a question, you have a problem filing a return, we're going to work with you on that. We have ways of giving you installment agreements. We have offers in compromise. So while I think it's important for people to worry that if you don't pay your taxes willingly, we're going to chase you down and we're going to be very unhappy about that. But if you're trying to be compliant and you run into a circumstance or a difficulty, you should not be afraid to contact the IRS, or if we contact you, we're not going to be banging down on your door. We're going to be trying to work with you to try to get you into compliance. Our goal is to have people figure out how much they owe and make it as easy as possible as we can for them to make those payments. And we understand sometimes people face financial difficulties and it's hard for them to pay their taxes, and we're anxious to sit down with them and work with them. The people we're chasing to the ends of the earth are the people who are consciously deciding they're not going to pay their taxes. They're going to hide their assets somewhere, whether it's abroad or in the United States, and they're actually going to work hard not to pay their taxes. And those people should be worried and fear that we're going to work very hard to make sure we find them, catch them, and appropriately prosecute them.
What prompts a gentleman like yourself who's had a successful career to take a job with an agency that admittedly doesn't have the best reputation among government agencies out there, especially after what was going on late last year?
Well, it's actually the challenge of what's been going on over the last year, as well as its other issues that attracted me to the job. I've spent 40 years in the private sector and the public sector dealing with only organizations under some challenges or stress. I've been a big believer in public service. The IRS is a critical agency for the government. We collect virtually all of the money that runs the government, and we deal with virtually every American. So it seemed to me an opportunity that I was honored to be asked to undertake, to deal with the agency, to work with the employees. I've been, as I say, delighted with the caliber of the employees, the enthusiasm they have for their job. So if I can come and be helpful in making the agency more efficient, but particularly if I can be helpful in working with the public to restore whatever trust has been lost over the last year in the IRS, that'll be important. So I'm trying to make it clear to the public that whoever you are, if you hear from the IRS, and we will do 1,400,000 audits this year, even with our resource constraints, you're not hearing from us because of your political party, your political affiliation, any organization you belong to. You're not hearing from us because you go to church or you don't go to church. You're hearing from us because there's something in your return that we need more information about. And whatever your return looks like, we would answer and deal with that return the same way, no matter who it was who had filed that return. So we want people to be comfortable and confident, no matter what they've heard or what their view is, that we are a non-political agency. We're involved in tax administration. We want to treat everybody fairly. We want to treat them appropriately. And I want people to be comfortable and confident that no matter who they voted for in the last election, what meeting they went to 2 weeks ago, what op-ed they wrote any time, that's not why they're hearing from us. They're only going to hear from us, and we have controls and procedures to make sure that happens, only because something in their return requires more information. Great, thank you all.